Order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you to our witnesses for joining us here today. We are all looking forward to your testimony. Thank you also for your flexibility with the later start this afternoon. I'd like to take a moment to offer my deepest sympathies to Majority Whip Clyburn on the passing of his beloved wife, Emily. My thoughts are with him and his family during this time of sorrow. We are here today to examine the role of artificial intelligence in shaping the work of the future. Recent developments in machine learning algorithms combined with increasing computing power and data generation have enabled rapid advances in the accuracy, efficiency, and applicability of artificial intelligence systems. AI systems have already begun to change the nature of work and the workforce. They are being used in manufacturing processes, medical care, and customer service. As we talk, and we will talk about this, as we talk about job loss that will occur as advanced technology increasingly affects all occupations and wage levels, companies in my district in southeastern Michigan are also telling me how much trouble they are having trying to fill the jobs they have available. A 2017 study by the McKinsey Global Institute found that approximately half of all work activities could be automated by technologies that are already available today. So we need to start having the discussion at a broader level about how available jobs will transform rather than disappear as specific tasks are taken over by AI systems and the workers take on new job roles. The advances enabled by artificial intelligence also have the potential to create new kinds of jobs, and in doing so, elevate the standard of living and quality of life for many. 65% of children entering elementary school today, in the year 2019, will ultimately end up working in completely new job types that currently do not exist. As the integration of these technologies transform work and create new jobs, there will be significant need to ensure we are training workers to succeed at all levels, from the factory floor worker to the radiologist. The key is ensuring that the gains from AI systems are shared by all Americans, increasing the quality of life for everyone. As we discussed at a hearing in this committee in June, if our nation leads in the responsible development of AI, we can help set the standards and norms the rest of the world will follow. That applies equally to the use of AI in the workplace. We are holding this hearing today to discuss what we do know and also explore what we do not know. And the compelling topic of the future of work has certainly compelled many. Research studies, companies who are organizing and orienting their organizational development, academic institutions, and this very body are compelled to act. As AI-powered robots become more common, the question we ask is, how do we ensure worker safety alongside these robots? Will artificial intelligence be routinely used to monitor workers, as some companies do today? How do we balance privacy rights with the potential productivity benefits and worker benefits these analyses could provide? How do we keep this data secure and prevent its malicious use? And finally, how do we get a better understanding of the macroeconomics and labor outlook so that the government, companies, colleges, universities, and workers can all plan for this transition? It's the question hanging above us in this 21st century age. These are just some of the questions the researchers are pursuing. So I am greatly looking forward to today's hearing because we are compelled to act, to explore, to develop good policy, to stand up for the value of work, what knowledge and tools researchers, companies, and workers need going forward, and how federal science agencies, such as the NSF, are helping to lead the way. Before I recognize Dr. Marshall for an opening statement, or he said, okay, wait, hold on one second. We're pausing on an opening statement. Okay, before we move on for opening statements, what I'd like to do at this time is to present for the record a letter from Kelly Services in support of this hearing, and I would also like to submit the executive summary from the 2018 report written by the great Mark Murrow and his team from the Brookings Institution titled Automation and Artificial Intelligence, How Machines Are Affecting People and Places. A great read that's recommended by many. So at this time, I would like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Dr. Arthur Lupia. Dr. Lupia is the Assistant Director of the Directorate for Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences at the National Science Foundation. He also serves as the Hale R. Varian Collegiate Professor of Political Science at the University of Michigan. Delighted to have you here on behalf of the University of Michigan as well as the NSF, Dr. Lupia. And you also serve as the co-chair of the Office of Science and Technology Policy's Subcommittee on Open Science. Dr. Lupia's research focuses on processes, principles, and factors that guide decision-making and learning. He earned his bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Rochester and his social science PhD from the California Institute of Caltech. Our next witness is Dr. Aaron Brynjolfsson. Dr. Brynjolfsson is the Schussel Family Professor of Management Science and Director of the MIT Initiative on the Digital Economy. His research focuses on the effects of information technologies on business strategy, productivity, and performance, digital commerce, and intangible assets. He is the author and co-author of several books, including The Second Machine Age, Work, Progress, and Prosperity in a Time of Brilliant Technologies. We applaud you for this milestone work that you have published, sir. We are delighted to have you here at this hearing. And we also know that you received your bachelor's and master's degrees in applied mathematics and decision sciences from Harvard University and a PhD from MIT in managerial economics. Our third witness is Mrs. Rebekah Kowalski. Ms. Kowalski is the Vice President of Manpower Manufacturing, a role she has held since January 2019 throughout her long and remarkable career at Manpower Group. Her current portfolio focuses on developing solutions that help organizations and leaders deal with the implications of the shortage of skilled workers and the evolution of roles and skills. She previously led the team that worked with MXD, a digital manufacturing institute, to identify how roles and skills will evolve as manufacturing changes with the increasing introduction of digital technologies. A truly profound work of primary research that has helped many companies orient and prepare for the future of work. Ms. Kowalski received her BA in English from the University of Wisconsin-Parkside and her master's from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Our final witness, Dr. Sue Ellspermann, is the president of Ivy Tech Community College of Indiana. Prior to her role at Ivy Tech. Dr. Ellspermann was Indiana's 50th lieutenant governor from 2013 to March of 2016. As vice chair of the Indiana Career Council, she led efforts to align the state's education and workforce development system to meet the needs of employers, a continued focus for her as president of Ivy Tech. She certainly focuses on the cross-cutting collaboration that is so needed with our training centers and our employers. And Dr. Ellspermann earned her Bachelor's of Science in Industrial Engineering from Purdue University and her Master's of Science and PhD in Industrial Engineering from the University of Louisville. Absolutely fabulous. As our witnesses should know, you will each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony, and your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. When all of you have completed your spoken testimony, we will begin with questions. Members will have 5 minutes to question the panel. And at this time, Dr. Lupia, we'd like to start with your 5-minute testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Stevens, Representative Marshall, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Dr. Arthur Lupia. I'm the Assistant Director of the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate at the National Science Foundation. It is a pleasure to be with you this afternoon to discuss how NSF is helping our fellow citizens prepare for the future of work. Work is a vital and dynamic element of our society. Work powers our offices and our factories. It supports our communities and our nation. And as we can all see, work is changing. We know that AI and related technologies can increase national competitiveness by making businesses, governments, and social organizations more competitive and more effective. These technologies can also create many new careers. If these technologies are applied with sufficient foresight, they can create new opportunities for workers and improve quality of life for communities across the country. How can we achieve a future where technological change benefits as many people as possible? At the National Science Foundation, we believe that achieving this future requires working together. Our Future of Work at the Human Technology Frontier program treats future work, future technology, and future workplaces as deeply integrated and intertwined elements of our nation's work-based ecosystem. In NSF's Future of Work approach, we collect data on worker experiences to inform social and behavioral research on workers and workplaces. This research, in turn, can guide technological development. Work like this can reveal new ways to empower workers and increase productivity. Studying workers, workplaces, and technology together are the key to creating benefits that everyone can realize. And pioneering research of this kind is already underway. On the screen, there we go, is one of the projects NSF has recently supported. This is a human being in an exoskeleton. Today's exoskeletons help human beings transport very large objects and navigate impossible situations. But this project is about tomorrow's exoskeletons. The device that you see here is not just an exoskeleton of the body, it's an exoskeleton of the mind. This exoskeleton of tomorrow provides information to the worker through an augmented reality system. The system empowers the worker to process information and make better decisions with unprecedented speed. This type of technology is awesome, and it'll have impacts far beyond factory floors. Today, for example, the Veterans Administration is one of the nation's leading users of exoskeletons. Tomorrow's exoskeletons will open new opportunities for our veterans. NSF's Future of Work program supports this technology by incentivizing developers, AI experts, and workplace specialists to collaborate. Working together, researchers and developers can increase performance, decrease injury, expand access, and improve quality of life in ways that just would not be possible if any of these groups worked alone. That's what NSF can do. To date, NSF's Future of Work Big Idea supported projects in a wide range of work contexts, including healthcare, power grids, farming, learning, scientific research, transportation, emergency response, and of course, manufacturing. NSF not only supports fundamental research in these areas, but also supports efforts to bring these big ideas to market. For example, NSF recently unveiled new Future of Work awards from its Convergence Accelerator. NSF's Convergence Accelerator is designed to fund technology-based partnerships that simultaneously advance national priorities and create new opportunities for American workers. For example, a project based at the University of Michigan is examining how to combine research in AI, data science, and industrial psychology to find better ways to link workers with innovative new training and educational opportunities that will help them not only contribute, but thrive and build amazing careers in their new workplaces. This is an exciting time for our country, and like you, NSF is grateful to see our nation's brightest minds collaborating on the fundamental research that will transform our workplaces, empower our workforce, and provide tremendous new sources of innovation for our nation. So thank you for having this hearing today and for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Dr. Brynjolfsson, yeah.
Here we go. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Stevens, Representative Marshall, and members of the committee. Thank you so much for inviting me to share some of the research my team and I have been doing. Addressing the opportunities created by AI is one of the most important challenges for government in the coming decade. Thanks to AI, some weird and wonderful things are beginning to happen. Cars are learning to drive themselves. Machines can now recognize your friends' faces. When you see people walking down the street talking on their phones, you don't know if they're talking to another human or to a machine and expecting the machine to answer. Just last week, Siri tried to join into a conversation I was having about interest rates. However, it's also critical to understand that we're very far from what we call artificial general intelligence, the kind of AI that spans the full range of human intelligence. While machine learning is now superhuman in many tasks that involve mapping a particular set of inputs into outputs, humans outperform machines in most other cognitive tasks. Therefore, we are not facing the imminent end of work, but we are facing a major restructuring of work. In research that I've been doing with my colleagues, we find that few, if any, occupations will be fully automated by this new wave of technologies, but at the same time, few, if any, will be unaffected. Instead, most will be transformed. For instance, the job of a typical radiologist consists of 26 distinct tasks. While machine learning has made impressive advances in some of them, like reading medical images, it is of little use in most of the other tasks, like counseling patients. So mass unemployment is not the challenge of our era. Instead, we face challenges in two other areas. One is delivering productivity growth, and the other is reducing inequality. Today, despite impressive improvements in AI, productivity growth has actually slowed down. Between 1995 and 2004, it averaged 2.8% per year, but since 2005, productivity has been just 1.3% per year. That's less than half the growth rate of the previously. So why is that? Well, the bottleneck is actually not the technology, but rather the lack of complementary process innovations, workforce reskilling, and business dynamism. The second challenge is inequality. There's no economic law that says that everyone will benefit from technological advances. As the economic pie grows, it's possible for some people to be left behind, even as others benefit disproportionately. Indeed, over the past several decades, the benefits of economic growth have been very unequal. Not only has the median income barely grown since the late 1990s, but other social indicators have actually worsened. For the first time in history, average life expectancy of Americans has begun to fall, driven by worse mortality of less educated Americans. It's no coincidence that these are exactly the Americans who haven't shared in our economic growth. So my policy recommendations can be grouped into 5 key areas. The first one is to reinvent education. We need to recommit ourselves to investment in education. It's a field that the U.S. has once led the world. We also need to reinvent it so that we focus more on the kinds of skills that machines cannot match. These include creativity and interpersonal skills. Secondly, we need to rebalance capital and labor. As noted in a recent research report by the MIT Work of the Future initiative, our tax code and other policies are heavily skewed towards helping capital rather than labor. We need a more level playing field, particularly as AI starts to affect more and more of the labor force. This means taxing capital at comparable rates, encouraging investments in human capital, just as we do for physical capital, and updating corporate governance to recognize workers as stakeholders alongside stockholders. We can also expand the earned income tax credit to boost incomes for the working poor and use revenues from things like carbon taxes to lower taxes on work. Thirdly, we need to invest in U.S. technological leadership. U.S. leadership in AI and other technologies is at serious risk because we have cut federal investment in R&D even as other nations have boosted theirs. Federal science agencies like the NSF, working with our leading universities and private industry, have a central role in maintaining and extending America's science and technology leadership in AI and other areas. Fourth, we need to welcome high-skilled immigrants. A vastly disproportionate number of America's leaders in science and business are immigrants or the children of immigrants. When I asked my students at MIT what was the most important message I should convey to you here in Washington regarding AI policy, they unanimously advised me to push for less restrictive immigration policies. And fifth and finally, we need to work harder to support entrepreneurship. Boosting entrepreneurship can help reverse the stagnation of wages for the bottom half of the income distribution, particularly those who have been most adversely affected by automation. Among the policies that can help with this is decoupling healthcare from employment, reforming occupational licensing, and direct investments in teaching and entrepreneurship, and boosting new business formation. I think that with the right policies, AI can be harnessed to make the next decade the best decade in U.S. history.
Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Dr. Baird, and Representative Marshall. On behalf of Manpower Group, thanks for the invitation to speak today on such an incredibly important topic. Manpower Group is the world leader in innovative workforce solutions. Every day we connect more than 600,000 people to work around the world in a wide range of skills and industries. One of our most predominant industry sectors is the manufacturing sector. And I oversee our manufacturing solutions practice. I've worked with a lot of companies as they are struggling to deal with the twin challenge of finding enough rightly skilled talent and figuring out how they're going to navigate the bright new future that digital offers. Manufacturers are reporting talent shortages as they struggle to find the right blend of technical and soft skills. Our perspective is that AI, machine learning, and other digital technologies produce new jobs that require new skills. Some of those we can't even imagine yet. Our research shows that over 90% of employers expect to be impacted by digitization over the next 2 years. 87% of them plan to maintain or increase headcount. 4% say they don't know. And yes, there is a small number, 9% of them, that say that they anticipate a reduction. Fully 75% say this is going to require new skills. Skills that we do not currently have in our workforce, and skills that we can't actually even anticipate. In 2017, we released a study with MXD, which is formerly known as the Digital Manufacturing and Design Innovation Institute, on how digital technologies, including AI and machine learning, would impact manufacturing jobs. The study was accomplished in partnership with academia and industry and identified 165 new or significantly evolved roles. Today, the majority of manufacturing roles are in the general entry-level population by count. Those are roles like picker-packer, assembler, operator, helper, laborer. In the manufacturing sector, the backdrop here is that we are going to produce 3.5 million new jobs over the next decade, while at the same time, 2.7 manufacturing workers are set to retire. Many of the new jobs will be in these more specialized areas like technicians, testers, analysts, specialists, and that's a significant shift for us. We have the following concerns. First, employers are uncertain about how digitization will impact roles and skills and over what period of time. Second, the ability of employers of all sizes to invest in upskilling falls far short of what is required to produce the workforce they need, both from a time and resource perspective. Thirdly, the talent shortage impacts all types of talent from entry level to leadership, meaning employers have to determine the best way to allocate precious dollars. That disproportionately impacts small and mid-sized manufacturers. There are several obstacles to being resourceful around talent attraction and upskilling. One, it's difficult for organizations to predict workforce needs more than a year in advance. Strategic workforce planning does not have as long of a horizon as it needs. Without enough exact match talent, we need to shift to hiring on potential and learnability, but HR systems and processes are still geared towards finding an exact match. Third, job descriptions need to be less stationary and more evolutionary so that individuals can actually anticipate the need for ongoing learning and adaptation. And four, organizations lack sufficient funding for workforce training. An example of improved training processes is what we do with Rockwell Automation in our Academy of Advanced Manufacturing, where we take veterans and we put them through a 12-week embedded program, and we graduate them as certified automation technicians. They walk away with a job that on average is double what they were making when they came in, and the employer walks away with the talent that they need. With 12 million manufacturing workers in the US, we need those kinds of nimble programs, many, many more of them, in order to ensure that people have a path to sustainable prosperity. And we need to start now. Don't count the humans out. Talent is, in fact, the most renewable resource we have on the planet. It is ready to learn, adapt, and thrive in new environments, and we need to work collectively now across educators, employers, and individuals to become proactive builders of talent, to develop a workforce with the skills employers and individuals need to remain competitive, both now and in the future. Thank you again to the subcommittee for the opportunity to share my testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens. Ranking Member Baird, welcome. And Representative Marshall, it's really a privilege to be here representing community colleges today and Ivy Tech Community College specifically as we talk through machine learning, artificial intelligence, and particularly how that's affecting community colleges and how we're working with industry and businesses to establish an ecosystem to address the changing demands. I also will speak at the end about what the federal government could do to assist in this work. So remember that community colleges are the most common type of U.S. college, with Ivy Tech being one of those established in 1963 as a vocational technical college, now a statewide, largest in the nation statewide system, singly accredited with 150,000 students in 18 campuses, 40 locations. But think about our student who is now the traditional student, is that community college-like student who is part-time. Average age is probably 27 years old, Pell eligible, and a quarter of those students have dependents, children that is, and you can see more in our report. But how will that impact us as we look at AI and machine learning? And what you heard from several of my colleagues here is that there will be some displacement, but with that displacement will become very good opportunities. And it's up to our community colleges to prepare out those students, those employees, for the wide spectrum of industries and opportunities that are out there. So let me talk about just a few of the very concrete things we've done, and I thank Ms. Kowalski for sharing some of those as well in the manufacturing space. But one that I'm sure she'd be interested in is the partnership that Ivy Tech's done with the Smart Automation Certification Alliance, as they've developed the first certifications in Industry 4.0, which we know will be the future of those factories of the future and the kind of credentials we'll need in that very connected manufacturing environment. But at the community college level, we work with many partners. For instance, Salesforce, through their Pathfinders program, to earn Salesforce Developer and Administrator certifications. We have many certificates in informatics and software development at the associate level. We work with Apple in their iOS systems applications. We work with Cisco as they overhaul their certifications to embed those right into our IT programs. With Amazon Web Services, we are developing cloud computing certificates and soon to be an applied associate in cloud computing. All of those are staying with those industries and particular businesses to make sure that we're providing our students with the kind of skills that they will need. I'm going to speak to a partnership we have with industry, particularly our Achieve Your Degree program, which is a redesign of the tuition reimbursement program, where industries actually pay for, at the end of that cycle, the tuition that that employee of theirs pursues. But we concierge style come to the industry, that business, to enroll, to do financial aid eligibility, and then to ensure that the programs align with what the business has. In doing that, we've had a great partnership with our Indiana Chamber of Commerce, statewide, more than 200 companies doing that. I'll just share one with Cook Group in Bloomington, Indiana, where 500 of their employees are being skilled up, have already earned 100 credentials in the last 3 years. Now, in design, we put everything from an economist standpoint into quadrants to make sure that the highest demand areas with the smallest supply of employees are being built up into those particular quadrants. We'll describe those quadrants more in our full report, but in doing that, we make sure that we are putting our focused energy in the high demand areas, that we're shrinking problems that need to shrink, and that we are seeking equilibrium in this highly changing environment. And it's working. In IT, we just last year increased our completions by 75% in a single year, and we see that across our programs. I'm going to spend my last moments talking about what we could do with some federal support. You know, employers hate to have to pay unemployment insurance into that trust fund. Several years ago, that was, most of our states were in a deficit. We were in Indiana. Congressman Baird remembers that. Today, we are at $900 million in the black. Those funds could be deployed towards this work of reskilling earlier than when that person is displaced, but when you decide on that technology, and we're hopeful that there will be some willingness of this Congress to look at making that available to a state and a community college system to experiment with how we could deploy a portion of those UI funds in these ways. We look for all kinds of support in reducing regulation so that we can change at the speed of the technologies that we're working with to ensure that all of our workers have those opportunities. And with that, I'll just thank you for the opportunity for appearing before the subcommittee and the opportunity to share the work of Ivy Tech Community College.
Well, thank you all. And at this time, the chair would like to recognize Ranking Member Dr. Baird for his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I apologize for being late, but I do admire you for going on without me. Thank you. That shows.
We're a team, you know.
So I appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate you waiting on me, and I'd like to make this opening statement. And thank you for holding this artificial intelligence and the future of work committee's hearing. Since the term AI was introduced in the 50s, we have made some huge advances in the field. And thanks to critical investments by government, industry, universities, and the United States in leading a global AI research and development. Today, AI systems have been deployed in every sector of the U.S. economy. These technologies have already delivered significant benefits for the U.S. economic prosperity, for the environmental stewardship, and the national security. AI has long been a subject of interest of the House Science Committee, and we have held several important and productive hearings on this topic. In the past, we have discussed how to define AI, the science of AI technologies, and the needs for standards to address ethics and potential bias. Now this afternoon, we will examine AI from the perspective of the American worker. In order to remain a leader in AI, I believe we must prepare our workforce for the next generation of opportunities in this technology and for a future defined by a lifelong learning experience. In order to grow our economy, I also believe we must acknowledge and understand how AI is changing and will continue to change the jobs and lives of hardworking Americans. This is a large-scale effort that is going to require cooperation between industry, that was already mentioned here, industry, academia, and the federal agencies. So I'm pleased to see that the Trump administration is making this issue a priority and recently established the National Science Council for the American Worker and the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. American industry has responded well to the administration's initiatives. Over 300 companies and organizations have pledged to study and expand education, training, reskilling, opportunities for American workers to gain AI-relevant skills. We also need to rethink how we educate future workers and reskill the workers of today, all the way from K through 12 schools to the community colleges, the vocational schools, and the four-year universities. Some leaders in the U.S. education system are already finding innovative ways to develop a highly skilled AI workforce, one of the future. We have heard about some of those efforts from my friend, Dr. Sue Ellspermann, president of the Ivy Tech Community College system in our home state of Indiana. Sue, so glad to have you here today. At Ivy Tech, Dr. Ellspermann works to address the changing demands of employers in the Hoosier State by providing strategic support and career planning for students at community colleges and vocational schools and working closely with local industry. I look forward to hearing more about her important work in our community and how it would be applied across the country. Over the next few months, this committee will be working towards bipartisan legislation to support a national strategic strategy on artificial intelligence. The challenges we must address are how industry, academia, and the government can work together on AI challenges, including today's critical workforce questions, and what role the federal government should play in supporting industry as it drives innovation. I want to thank our accomplished panel for witnesses for their testimony today, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear this committee and I appreciate the opportunity to hear how this committee and the federal government can support innovation and education to ensure a bright future for America's workers, our students, and maintain our leadership in AI. So thank you.
At this time, we're going to begin the 5 minutes of questioning, and the chair will recognize herself for 5 minutes. Dr. Lupia, in your testimony, you discuss a recent award made to the University of Michigan to support research on how humans and robots are working together in construction environments, and you stated that despite recent advances in robot functionality, many fundamental questions in robot interaction remain unanswered. Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit further? And also, could you touch on some of the major social science research questions regarding human-robot interaction and where we need to go from here?
Thank you for that question. As discussed in the opening statements, there are things right now that AI and robots can do that humans can't do, but there are many things that humans can do that robots can't do. And when we're thinking about the workplace of the future, particularly its impact on workers and workplaces, there are these fundamental questions about what do the two groups know now, and what can we expect them to know in the future to empower workers. So I think about farms, for example, right? So I grew up on a farm, and so when I was a kid, people milked cows, and if you ever done that, it's not the most fun thing. Now they have robots that can milk cows. So if you think about how just a farm, that's pretty simple. There are things that people can do that robots can't do, and things that robots can do that people can do. And so through a number of grants, right, we're trying to help factories, farmers, offices, and so forth think through how do you make workplaces more efficient? How do you make them more effective with this set of evolving skills? Some of it requires trust. Right, so if we're going to automate a manufacturing process, the worker has to trust the robot or the machine. And trust is a great thing unless the robot's about to do the wrong thing. And so you've always got to have an override capacity. What we're trying to do at NSF is bring large groups of people together to understand at a pretty fundamental level, when is the trust relationship going to work? When is it going to fail? And as robots get better at things, how does that change how we should organize the workplace? So that's the fundamental question. It takes understanding humans, because if you press the override button at the wrong time, right, you can disrupt the process. If you wait too long, unintended consequences can happen. So understanding the human-robot interaction is really critical to all the progress we want from manufacturing to farms to offices of the future.
to be successful. And Ms. Kowalski, you might have given us the line of the day, which is don't count the humans out. And you also, in your testimony, discussed the rapid change in skills being sought by employers. And you know, in terms of how we think about job descriptions to account for this rapidly changing marketplace for skills, and also promote a mindset of supportive, continuous skill development, how do we do it all? How do we bring that together?
So I think there's a few things. One is just determining that this is what we have to do, right? It's a decision that we have to make, that we cannot allow the workforce to stay still. That there is no grassy plateau on which we'll all be able to stretch out when transformation is done. It will be an unending climb, an evolution and adaptation, which we're very good at as human beings, right? But the way that we approached education and employment was we educated to the job. People came into an exact match environment, and then they made progressions up the ladder based on merit. We haven't seen something come in that acts so rapidly. Think about automation, and it was about 15 years playing out in the last cycle. We're talking about something that's going to play out by this research in 3 to 5 years. It's unfolding now, and it will get faster, and the peaks and troughs will get steeper. And so how we get people attenuated to that shift, that starts all the way back in K-12 and moves all the way through and in employment. And the hardest thing is going to be taking the people that are currently employed and helping them understand they haven't done anything wrong. They are hardworking, they've been doing a great job, and these are the new set of skills that they have to assimilate. And there has to be a new contract, right? And that contract is one of, you put in for continuous adaptation and evolution, we'll be right there to meet you with the resources. You know when we were good at doing that? It was in the 50s and 60s when we hired on potential. We built whole companies hiring on potential for jobs we didn't even know what they were going to look like. And people got used to making the progression and having a partnership with employment and educators in order to do that. And it's going to take a system to do it.
Well, I am just at time, so you can tell we're in a rich topic area. So I'm going to yield back the remainder of my time, and I am going to recognize Dr. Baird for 5 minutes of questioning. You got this, Dr. Baird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Ellspermann, I'm sure that you recognized I was probably going to start with you, but anyway.
Thank you.
The thing that, and I know you spent a lot of time in this area and thinking about it, but the needs of industry today compared to the future, and this technology that we're discussing today is changing so fast because of quantum computing and that sort of thing. So I guess, in other words, how do you feel, or how do you see Ivy Tech balancing that need for today and then in the future? Kind of give us some feel what you think that might look like.
Very good. So actually, 3 years ago, the General Assembly in Indiana understood how important it would be that we would be workforce aligned as a system, and actually required that in addition to having a provost, I have a chief workforce officer, which makes sure this alignment happens. So I alluded in my comments to this way that we classify all of our programs, because we know it's a moving target. We know that there is BLS and MZ and other good data out there economically to project the future. We know that broadly, but it's not accurate at the local level. So we take that and we let the local industry work with us to look at what's coming, what is the real demand, and then we size our programs on every campus, every program to be that right size. And that's where our quadrants, that quadrant one is where we focus. It is those high demand, low supply, not enough students to fill that work, and making sure we're building those programs. We have limited enrollment programs that we have to push on. We have programs that have to shrink so that they are the right size, or maybe discontinue, and then finally equilibrium. That work is working. It is working across our state. We can take the local data to understand that what maybe the economic data is not quite accurate to what the local needs are, and we can shore up and we can shrink, and we do that in a very rapid way. What becomes challenging is the support at the federal level to get those kind of programs when you need new programs stood up to quickly stand those up in 3 to 6 months so that an employer gets the kind of skill set that they need. And so we look to any support we can get with our US DOE to quickly approve programs. But as I shared, looking at new ways to anticipate when we know these changes are coming and we know there's a higher demand, how do we identify that employee at risk early, even if it is just a year or a year and a half in advance? We can then begin skilling before that individual is out of a job, unemployed, which is for many much more than just about being out of a job. It is psychological impact. It is a feeling that a trust has been broken with that employer. So how do we proactively work with them? And whether we use unemployment insurance as a part of that trigger, we need to change that mindset to create that contract again between employer and employee. And I believe the community colleges, at least Ivy Tech, is working very hard to get there. But I know we will be the front lines for most of employers as they look to scale up their employees. And it's our job to be as rapid as we can.
So thank you. Dr. Lupia, I'm glad to hear you came from the farm, and I couldn't help but say, several of you mentioned the importance of the human factor. I think you mentioned that. But I just want you to know that those old cows have a vested interest in how well these artificial things. But anyway, I thought maybe you might want to elaborate. You know, I've been fascinated by NSF's Convergence Accelerators since Director Cordova spoke about them this committee in May. Would you mind elaborating on how this new approach to research will improve our understanding of the future work and enhance the lives of the American workers?
Absolutely, sir. Thank you for asking that question. The Convergence Accelerators really build on the traditional NSF approach. So in NSF, we fund all of science. But the idea with the Convergence Accelerators is from the beginning, you bring in other partners, people in the room who, if great ideas emerge, they can bring them to market. So the Convergence Accelerators have really been an exciting way to think about how to take amazing collaborations and bring them to market. So I'll give you one example because we just started funding these things. One has to do with reskilling the workforce, and it is funded coincidentally at Purdue University, and it focuses on apprenticeships. So both of my grandparents were in the trades, and the way that you've learned a trade for 100 years is through an apprenticeship. So that takes a number of months, and you follow somebody around, and you learn the trade. But for a small company, it's really expensive to take one of your workers and have them do an apprentice for 6 months. So one of the Convergence Accelerators is a project built around using technology to do apprenticeships at scale. So imagine we could take what a master plumber knows, or a master technician, or someone who runs a computer, and we can follow them around and then create scalable, low-cost ways to distribute this information to everybody. And one of the ways you can do that is through having simulations, right? So instead of one person shadowing the expert, you can build a simulation where 50 people can have a virtual reality experience of shadowing the expert. And so it has a lot of the benefits of the traditional apprenticeship, and of course you still need the one-to-one contact, but this is a way to really make that happen at scale. And again, if you're a small company, if you can go to community college or somewhere else and get this type of training, it's a real game changer. So the idea here is apprenticeship, lower costs, improves speed and reliability, minimizes errors, and this is something that the Convergence Accelerator, I think, can really do to help companies across the country.
Thank you.
At this time, the chair would like to recognize Dr. Marshall for 5 minutes of questioning.
All right, thank you, Chairwoman. Dr. Ellspermann, I'm a community college graduate, my wife a community college graduate, huge fans of my community colleges. The technical colleges can quickly pivot to the job needs of my community, and I think that's where the rubber meets the road. How do you measure success? What are you measuring to say we're being successful in our technical college that you run?
We measure success the way most Americans do, by wages. We actually measure the wages of our graduates 1 year out to see what they're making. Our goal is that 80% of all of our graduates will make above median wage 1 year after completion. We're at 45% today. We were at 38% 2 years ago, and we're marching our way. But we think that is one fair way to do that. In addition to, we also hold ourselves accountable to those 4 quadrants. We want 80% of our programs to be in equilibrium, meaning we're roughly producing the number of graduates needed for our
And
community.
are you measuring their debt when they're leaving too?
We have minimal, community college debt is kind of the best kind of debt. It's like under $10,000. It's the way to do college. But we do measure debt, and we do measure what those students have, and always are looking for ways to continue to reduce that.
I'm not sure how long you've been at Ivy Tech, but what are you doing differently today than a year ago, than 3 years ago, or 5 years ago?
We have reinvented how we're delivering. So we've gone from traditional 16-week courses to 8-week courses, because guess what? Adults do better in that format. There's higher pass rates, lower drop rates. We've just redesigned our online education. We're one of the largest online educators in the country. We know we have to do that better, because guess what? Single moms need to be able to take courses online, and they have to be as good as the face-to-face delivery. So we're in that redesign. We are looking at all of the way we do our work to align better to industry and to deliver in the best way for our students. And there's much more to do, Congressman.
So certainly as an obstetrician, you're hitting on exactly who I'm thinking of, that single mom who maybe could get her auntie or her sister to come in and help with the kids for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but it's hard to get them to commit to 18 weeks. One of the things that we're certainly looking at is using Pell Grants in a non-traditional situation, what you're describing. Hope that we can make some progress there at some point in time.
Thank
We have the NSF person here, Dr. Lupia, as well. What would you tell him? How can NSF work better with community colleges and technical colleges? What ideas out there outside the box that you wish we could get better engaged with NSF?
I would say certainly in helping us to adopt that technology early. We are not funded at the levels of research institutions, as you might guess. So keeping our labs up to date with that front edge technology at the same time industry's getting it, not a generation later. We really need to have it early. Certainly Perkins helps on that front, but that cycle of rapid change is so much more quicker than it was generations ago, that we have to be able to refresh our equipment every year, 2 or 3, which there's probably a partnership to be built there.
Okay, Dr. Lupia, any return thoughts or comments?
We are so grateful for the work that your organization does, and part of our Future of Work project is really to try and make this information and these collaborations happen a lot earlier. So one of the scientific approach is there's a relationship between jobs and skills. Most jobs take a whole bunch of skills. And as jobs evolve, some of the skills that we have now will still be relevant, but there will be these other new skills that you can use. So we are working with governments, industry, and a whole range of researchers to try and project how are skills and jobs likely to evolve. If we can figure that out and put that into databases and match it to jobs as they're evolving, and if our partners can make that data available to everyone, because that's the idea, right? We have projects in several states, Georgia, West Virginia now, where we're collecting data from them and then trying to push out real-time and futuristic data about how jobs are likely to change. This can produce really great efficiencies, because now it can tell community colleges and others, these are the skills that employers need now. These are the skills they're likely to need 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 24 months from now. And with that type of data, you not only get these efficiencies, now you have this possibility someone can go to a college and not just get the next job, but be able to be given the skills that can help them build a career that can take the next 2 or 3 steps in their life. So we want to be a tailwind to them and very supportive.
Sounds good. I'm going to start my community college caucus here someday. I need to do that. Thank you so much for everyone for being here, and I yield back.
Great, thank you. And at this time, we're going to begin a second round of questions. Dr. Brynjolfsson, as you kind of define the 2 urgent economic challenges around lack of productivity growth and too much inequality, and then gave us a list of pretty cogent and solid recommendations on how to address those. Do you mind weighing in a little bit around some of the ethical considerations that come up on this topic, and how those either might be urgent right now or might become more urgent as we move forward?
Absolutely. I think those are some of the most urgent challenges. They're a little outside some of the economics, but some of them also have an economic implication as well. Machine learning systems have been remarkable at helping us make all sorts of decisions, but one of the things we've also discovered is that they're only as good as the data that go into them, and oftentimes machine learning systems that are trained on decisions that humans made end up perpetuating or even amplifying the biases that we often have. So when it comes to hiring or making credit loan decisions or who gets parole, if the humans who were making those decisions had a set of biases, those are going to be captured by the systems and repeated. So, and we've seen there have been a number of academic studies showing that these are one of the challenges. And there's a challenge and there's an opportunity there. Part of the challenge is that the machine learning systems, particularly when they're using deep neural net technology, are difficult to understand what's going on inside the black box. They capture data sometimes from thousands or millions of examples, and they spew out a recommendation. It's hard to know exactly why, and that makes it challenging to second guess it, push the button and say, wait a minute, this may not be right. But the opportunity is that we can use techniques, one called a Turing box, where you have repeated sets of inputs with different characteristics going in and sets of outputs coming out, and you start learning what kinds of biases the machine may have inadvertently picked up, and you can correct those in a way that may actually ultimately, I think, be easier to correct than our own human biases. Because after all, it's not like humans are perfect either. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out using machine learning systems for some of these challenges, even when they are imperfect, but we should put very high on the agenda better understanding some of the ethical and other biases that they can create.
And Ms. Kowalski, coming out of your taxonomy that you helped to lead with MXD, do you mind just chiming in on some of the job roles that you identified that might be pertinent to some of the points that Dr. Brynjolfsson just talked about?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are 5 that I think really pop out of the work. One is what we call the digital era enterprise ethicist. And that's a conceptual title. Of course, no one puts that out there. But it was, an individual success profile of a role of who gets to make those decisions, who makes the call, who says how far is too far. Traditionally, these decisions have been kind of bandied about. Maybe IT owns this, or risk owns it, or legal owns it. Well, now, the way organizations are built in the digital era, it does not land neatly in one of those silos. It spreads across. And so where the buck stops actually is in a place where no one ever imagined it. And so there are, you made a comment earlier about how processes haven't caught up. So that's decision-making processes, that's organizational structures. It's a recognition that there's distributed decision-making more and more now in organizations, and we still have an end-of-year code of conduct compliance, mind-numbing 2 hours of training that we take that don't actually get to, can you identify the decision-making framework that your organization uses for developing new products, solutions, or making decisions around human beings? That's a fundamental issue that has to be dealt with now. A couple other things in terms of just roles that you're going to see popping up. Obviously, an organization only has one ethicist like that, but does have to establish the framework that supports it. But some of those specialist roles, like the machine learning specialist, the collaborative robotics specialist, the autonomous mobility engineer, right? How do you make sure that people of different ethnicities are recognized by that autonomous vehicle, right? How do you make sure that your HR systems are wired not to filter people out, but actually to bring people in based on potential? So those are some of those roles that we see coming up across all organizations, and obviously a few of those are quite specific to the manufacturing sector. And it's important that we figure these out, because what I see right now is a lot of organizations just trying to spread that responsibility out without actually recognizing that those need to be defined disciplines.
Well, and then as we talk about technical talent and the push for the hard-skilled trades and the work that we see out of our community colleges and the push for people to go into apprenticeship and other training programs, we still feel the need to train for analog, but also embrace the soft-skilled digital. And I'm slightly over time, but with just the remainder that I'm going to steal here, I'd love for each of you to just comment on this shift here and the balance of the soft with the hard-nosed technical skills that are still required in many jobs. And Dr. Ellspermann, if you want to start, we'd
I'd
certainly
be
love
happy to. We recognized 3 years ago that we weren't doing enough to prepare students to be successful in the workforce. Number one, making the right decisions in the careers, being prepared for the world of work, because not every student anymore comes to us already with some prior work experience, and that they would be successful, so building that in. So we are in the midst of rolling out what we call our career coaching and employer connections, which ensures every student, when they begin with us, begins building a career action plan, which includes work and learn experiences in industry to build some of that kind of real world work. We build in certainly soft skills throughout the curriculum, but those skills are learned best on the job, making sure every student has that experience before they get out there. But it is a early and often experienced meeting with employers, being out there, interviewing, understanding what's expected. And we know there's a lot to be done that we've never been really asked to do in the past, but is required by our industry, and know that that's a part of the future.
So I'll pick up on this theme of moving from analog to digital roles. So if you were to look at the research that we have, you'd see that 28% of those 165 new or highly evolved roles are sitting on the production floor. And what we estimated it was about 1 to 2 years of building up that talent to take on progressively more digital roles that would prepare them to take on progressively more digital roles. Because at the heart of it, the shift is really from doing things physically, physical operations, to accomplishing those operations through systems and technology. So you see a lot more skills like quantitative, tech-assisted, optimization-focused, integrative, mobile, virtual, and remote. That wasn't in the lexicon, really, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. Organizations that were starting to talk about it were the OEMs, for instance, that participated in this study. Now it's spreading throughout the supply network, and we have quite a task in front of us to gear people up, because right now they'll have to bridge from those more tactical analog roles into the transitional. So organizations have to keep a foot planted firmly where they are now and reach for the future.
Thank you for that question. I think this is a very important issue about the balance between hard and soft skills. I teach at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, so I certainly have appreciation for the importance and value of hard skills, and there are a number of technical capabilities that our workforce is lacking in that we need to supplement, and in some cases can be compensated very highly. But I also want to stress that soft skills are increasingly the ones that are less automatable, and therefore more humans will be needed to do those softer skills. They often have a longer span of relevance and usefulness. In the science article that I included as background, we created a framework for which tasks are suitable for machine learning. And indeed, the ones that were less likely to be automated were many of the softer skills involving creativity and interpersonal skills, persuasion, caring, coaching, leadership, teamwork. These are things that are very important in the workforce, and I also think that there are opportunities to teach them not just on the job, but by reinventing and reorganizing our educational curriculum. And a research agenda to better understand the kinds of skills that are needed going forward, I think would be a useful supplement to be able to map our strategies both in education and workforce training going forward.
I'd just like to state a principle and an example. One of the overarching principles for this problem is the idea of values-based design. So when you build a new technology, oftentimes we're thinking about the products and we're not thinking about the people. And so you don't think about the people and the workers and the consumers until the end of the process, when the unintended consequences and the inefficiencies are already built in. A lot of our recent misadventures with big tech, I think, are an example of not thinking about the people at the beginning. So now when we think about the future workforce, with values-based design, if we're thinking about the people in the workplace and how they're going to interact and all the people, if you think about that starting at time one, when you start to build the code, when you start to write the algorithms and so forth, there are all kinds of efficiencies that you can realize later on. And one of the efficiencies with respect to the workforce is personalized practice. Because once we think about how the new technology and how the new workplaces are going to affect people, now we can start to design, we can understand the set of skills that are going to be needed, and we can start to design personalized education so that people can learn efficiently the skills that they will need in this new place. But if you start with values at the beginning, you get to those outcomes. And then the point of practice is NSF is already trying to help support this through its Advanced Technological Education Program, or ATE. There are hundreds of community colleges and 48 ATE centers around the country that are really preparing students for STEM, for the skilled technical workforce. We got 17 million Americans in the skilled technical workforce now that they're in the workflow. They're building the machines and maintaining the computers and so forth. And the ATE program is really meant to encourage and improve the training of science and engineering technicians at both undergraduate and secretary level. So the things we're doing right now are things like ATE, but the future benefit really comes from thinking through, what are the human impacts of technology.
Thank you. And I'm lucky that my colleague likes me, because I spent some of that liking capital going slightly over, but it was really to hear from all of you and to have your expertise. So at this time, I'd like to recognize my good friend, Dr. Jim Baird, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question now is going to be directed at all of you at some point here. But online courses, I've got grandchildren that can use these faster than they could talk almost. And so my question relates to that in a way. We're using online courses for both formal and informal education. And so I guess the question is this: do we have any research that tells us what online courses and how to make those effective? And then also, how does online courses and what you're doing and this AI relate to STEM education? We're carrying a bill about the STEM careers and so on. So I'm going to start at your left, my right, and move that away. So go ahead. Thank you.
Congressman Baird, let me just say that I think we realize that online education is here to stay. It's not going to take over all of education. It's not the best way for all of education. It's not the preferred learning style for many. But we know, as I shared earlier with that single mom, she's got to have that opportunity to learn. So we have to, as educators, it's our responsibility to improve it constantly. It's come through many iterations. It'll go through many more, but it'll also be hybrid and augmented and many things that, as technologies we're talking about here today, ever greater enables us to make that online experience more real, more virtual, more in the way that learner wants to learn it. But I think we understand as community colleges, we have to lean in, and it's not an either or, it's an and, it's a both. And we need to continue to evolve. So we study, we look at, we know we have a gap between our face-to-face and our online learning. It's double-digit right now, which is not acceptable. So our goal is to eliminate that gap. That will be one measure of quality, but we will continue to look for ways to make that experience better for the online learner.
So I would agree with my co-panelist here that it is a both and. We have a number of occupations that employers won't accept a fully virtual experience for, so they require some sort of hands-on. I'm not going to let you touch an aircraft wing unless you have actually touched an aircraft wing before you come into my hangar, thankfully, right? And yet, the promise of this is pretty profound. So if you think back to the statistics that I shared earlier in terms of the gap that we have facing us in manufacturing right now, the only way to close it is to become incredibly resourceful about who we bring in from the sidelines. Women are certainly one untapped resource, but But what about people with physical and cognitive disabilities? Some of the greatest advancements made in digital technologies actually allows them to participate. The exoskeleton Dr. Lupia shared before is a marvelous example of how we can bring people in who before this have never even imagined of actually having the ability to participate in workforce. Strictly in online education and kind of what we think of as the standard, this is part of how Manpower Group is helping our associates upskill. We're offering all of our associates access to free education so that they can move up. With this idea, and just to validate what you were saying earlier, 6 to 8 weeks, that's the ability of an individual who's working full-time, sometimes 2 jobs and raising kids. So it opens up more opportunity than we've ever seen before, but it's not going to be the only way that we can educate because there are some things fundamentally that require hands-on.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Baird. At MIT, we've been doing a lot with online education for quite a while. One of the first big courses that we did was an online circuits design course. A couple 100,000 people took it. Nant Agarwal organized it. One of those students was actually in Mongolia and got a perfect score on it. Turned out to be a 17-year-old boy. And it was someone who wouldn't have been reached otherwise if there weren't this kind of technology. MIT went ahead and admitted him to the regular program, and it was somebody we probably wouldn't have found otherwise. We have put all of our regular courses online through the open courseware for free. People can just access and read. They can go. You can see my syllabi and see my lecture notes and problem sets. There's also an online system called edX. It's a consortium of universities. It started as MITx, Harvard, and others joined that coordinates to have it in a more structured way so that you go through a curriculum. And these are what are often called MOOCs, massive online courseware. I think there was an early wave of hype and excitement about them, taking over and doing all sorts of things. Some of it worked very well in some areas, like the circuits course. It didn't work so well in others. It's certainly not a silver bullet. But I think there are 4 things that we've learned. One is that for many applications, you can get enormous scale and much lower cost than we could have previously. Secondly, one of the unexpected benefits was an ability to personalize. People learn at different rates, and there's different media that work better for other people, and you can have things extremely customized and even personalized, and we're learning how to do that better. Thirdly, it often makes sense to do a hybrid system where you have people meet in person, particularly for some of the softer skills we were talking about. We often combine where people will physically get together, know their classmates, do things together, then work separately online, and then come back together, which is actually how a lot of workforce works as well, after all. And then last but not least, in fact, probably most importantly, I think that the biggest lesson is that there is no one best way of doing it. What we need to do is continually experimenting and testing. The success of a lot of tech companies has been this approach of A/B testing, constantly trying a new product, seeing if it works with different subsets of people. And we've very much taken that to heart with our online course offerings, and companies like Coursera, Udacity have been very successful in trying things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But it's an attitude of experiment testing. Your question was spot on, like what is the research showing, what's working and what isn't working? And there's a whole set of things that have failed miserably, another set of things that have succeeded. But I think we're still in very early days, and the digital approach allows you to gather data at a scale and cost and speed that just can't be matched in other ways.
Well, thank you for asking that question. At NSF, there's a foundation-wide effort to really support basic research on how to develop, evaluate, and improve online learning structures. One common way of doing it is you collect a lot of information about the types of things people need to know. You correlate that with information about the types of tasks that they may be asked to do. You integrate that with information about curricula and how people are doing in learning environments. And you take all that data together, and then you can really evaluate not just what does somebody remember after they take a test, but what can they do 6 months later. So there's all kinds of projects like that being funded at NSF, from trucking to farms to, there's even one for veterans. The idea is, how do you structure curricula to help veterans who want to get into STEM pipelines, because veterans have special abilities and sometimes special challenges. I guess the biggest headline in terms of what we've been doing recently is about a year ago, the Boeing company gave $10 million to NSF to try and really boost activity in this field. And within the last few weeks, we've announced 5 new awards to study open source learning platforms to try and train and reskill workers at a larger scale. And so this work, these are just announced, is going to be done at University of Southern California, Purdue, Northeastern, Colorado School of Mines, and Oregon State University. They're all getting a couple $1 million to test some really big ideas they have in different ways. So it's like, what is it, co-opetition or something? They're doing it in different ways, but they're all going to be able to learn from each other. And I think this is, our approach is to fund a lot of different innovations in the hope that, if some of them figure out something really innovative, it can be spread all over the country.
Well, thank every one of you, and thank you, Madam Chair, for letting us have that amount of time.
Well, before we bring this hearing to a close, it is evident that we are having a hearing with giants in terms of the expertise of our witnesses here today. And it was not shared, but the New Dems have a future of work task force that Congressman Bill Foster chairs, and I'm a part of. Some of our colleagues who do not sit on the House Science Committee, we will be sharing with them this testimony here today, all of your testimony and the questions. And certainly we find ourselves in a profound and exciting and sometimes perplexing moment. And so your expert testimony will guide our committee going forward and help us to embrace some of these challenges, turn them into opportunities, and continue to push forward in a measured and data-driven way, and in a way that really respects where our economy is heading and can head, and how we push to continue to support the workforce of the future. So thank you all so much for coming to Washington today, or taking some time to come to the Science Committee to join us for today's hearing. This record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional statements from members and for additional questions that the committee may ask of the witnesses, and of which we are expecting. So at this time, our witnesses are excused, and this hearing is now adjourned.